Imagine waiting 3 years for a simple piece of paper. Actually, it's a piece of plastic. This piece of plastic right here. It's called the Carte Vitale. It gives you access to social security in France. So, as a student, when I moved here first, started paying for it, and I got it 3 years later. I'm going to talk to you about that today with a cup of coffee on a weekend morning. I've made 200 videos on my channel, and at least for the first 60 videos, I think I put in about 20 hours of editing into each one of them. With the drone footage and everything, I loved doing that. And this one is something a little different, a little new for me. I'm just going to talk to you without any editing at all. So, I got this card 3 years after I moved to France while I was paying for my social security. Back in the day, you even had to pay for your mutual. Students now don't have to pay for that. That's the last 20%. They don't have to pay for that anymore. But it says over here, you can see it was issued on 2021, 17th of February 2021. Don't know if you can see that. Boom. That's my carte vitale. And I moved to France in 2016, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Wow, it's been a bit, not even 4 years. It's been 4 years. Now, paperwork in France is a pain. I think that's not much of a surprise to most people. But before I get into the weeds of that, I also want to talk to you about the kind of struggles one could face coming from a high context country like India. I did not know that these countries were so well catalogued, at least in the general culture, up until I read this book last winter, just a few months ago. I think it was in November when I started reading this book. And this author, Erin Meyer, great author, she draws this first scale over here about low context and high context. And then she puts up a couple of countries. Yeah, there are many disclaimers here, but she says the general culture does seem to function this way. So there's low context on the left side of a scale, and there's high context on the right extreme of that scale. Yeah, I'll explain to you what this low context is in a second. But what's really interesting is she goes on to ask this question: where do you consider there would be the most misunderstanding? One low context person communicating with another low context person, a high context person communicating with a low context person, or a high context person communicating with another high context person. Yeah, low context and high context, the definition that she wrote out was, I think, a little academic. Anyway, what I understood from what she said was when the culture does not have that much context, cultural context, so the communication is explicit. So thinking American people who would really set up the context before they get into, they're okay to spell it out. And back home in India, we are a high context country. Many of the things are understood, many of the things are known. A lot of these, yeah. So the culture in India itself is, oh, of course, when they said that, on the surface those words etymologically mean this, but they're meaning this because of this context. Yeah, so India is a high context country. And on that scale, India is somewhere on the far right of high context. They are very, very high context countries, only a few countries after India. And France is also high context, a little lesser than India, but it's also high context, relatively lesser than India. And on the other side, you have, what was it, USA? Was that Canada? The Netherlands, Australia, Canada, US. US is the most low context there is. Then there's Australia, Canada, Netherlands, Germany. So I've been thinking about this before I read the answer in her book, those three questions, and I was thinking the most difficulty should be between a low context and a high context person, because perhaps the low context person from his upbringing cannot perceive the fact that there is high context, and vice versa. A high context person would feel that the explicit communication from a low context guy is pedantic because he's just spelling everything out. I'm not a child, kind of a response. That's what I thought. And then she pointed out that it's actually two high context countries that struggle the most with misunderstandings, because while you are high context, both of you, your contexts are different. So the switching is hard because you have to learn to put yourself in that context before you understand what the words mean. And I have not really planned out a plan B for myself since I moved to France. So integrating into the French culture and communication was quite high on the priority list. I've always toyed with the idea of working in another neighboring country, but with my paperwork not completely solved out, because if I move anyway, France has been plan A for all this while now. So trying to get what they mean with their context, because there's a lot of cultural context, has been up on my priority. And working on the farm really helped me out. I keep bringing this up every time, the farm thing, because it's very unapologetically them in a countryside setup and very honest communicating people. So you get to really feel what the culture is about. So I spent 2 months in India last year, November and December. It was not planned to be this long. It turned out to be really long, and that was great. But when I went back to India, it was a breath of fresh air, which I was not expecting. I enjoyed the cultural cues which were so familiar to me as a child. Yeah, maybe from a professional point of view, I may not completely fit in because I'm really used to working in France now. I've been here for 5 years. Let me get comfortable. And I'd like to talk to you guys about the other scales someday too. This is the first of 8 scales that Erin talks about. And for the professional one, there are those other scales like hierarchy with your managers, or how does the culture perceive that. There's negative feedback. There's like a list of like these 8 scales that she talks about. If you can't see it, I'm sorry, but you should really consider getting this book. I may not do B-roll on this book, on this video at all. So yeah, there's these 3 levels of misunderstandings that you can have when you move in as an Indian or another high context person, like a Brazilian, for instance, to France, that maybe an American would not have, because that's what she's sharing. The low context, high context is easier. The 3 levels are first of all, which is common to most non-French people, is the French language. If you don't know this language, then a lot of these sentence constructions, pronunciations, expressions goes back to knock your socks off, for example. I saw that on Instagram the other day. If you translated that word for word to French, they wouldn't really follow what you're saying. Yeah. And there's a host of French expressions that non-French people don't understand. So there's the language part. There's also 2 levels in the language part. There's like getting the words themselves and then the expressions, but let's just put that on the first level, the language part. Getting the language is the first part of that misunderstanding, scope for misunderstanding possibility. And I've been a guy who worked really hard on language, and I can express myself comfortably. I can understand almost what everybody is saying in French. I don't struggle with French anymore. Then that begs the question, does that mean that there is no misunderstanding when it comes to somebody of different cultures? Like, how long does it take for you to really get the culture and to get the ball running after having moved to France? Is it like a year after you studied? I've been here for 8 years. So there's a couple of things to share. I'll come back to that anecdote of the paperwork not working out, the one with my Carte Vitale. It took me a hot second because I don't know. I really don't know why it took me a hot second. I can share with you my hypothesis. It's going to be quite speculative, but I can share with you that. But another instance also comes to mind where I was supposed to get a scholarship from URSAF, this government body. They're supposed to give me a scholarship, and they gave it to me a year after I finished my college, and it feels super unfair to get this money so much late. I mean, money is money, and it's good that the money is there. So I borrowed money from my parents for this, and then I had this money to send back. So I'm glad my parents had the financial muscle to support me through this journey. So the money did come back, and I did pay them back. After my first year of school, I paid them back. But it came a year late, and I'm not used to that from India. Like, if you ask for a driver's license in India in a month, you either know you're getting it or you're not getting it. And then you've got to probably try again. not going to wait a year before they say, oh yeah, by the way, that money we owed you. Yeah, I even remember writing to the tax people. They asked me to pay audiovisual tax this year in 2019. I mean, there's so many anecdotes with the French paperwork, the French bureaucracy. This was in 2020. For the year 2019, they wanted me to pay audiovisual tax. Of course, I'll pay it. It's like $110 or something. Of course, I'll pay it. But they owed me last year's tax return that they're supposed to send it to me, and they couldn't. They sent me a check. It got lost. I asked them to send it to my bank account because they were so happy to take money from my bank account, but they're not happy to put money into my bank account. So I called them a couple of times and can you please find another way? Can I come collect the check? I can't seem to receive it in my post. Can you help me out with this? And there was a lot of silence from their side. And I remember this time when they asked me, like 1 month into not having paid my audiovisual tax, they sent by letter. This letter I somehow get conveniently. They said, if you don't pay your audiovisual tax in a month, we will majoration. We will fine you 10%. So it was 110, 170 euros, something like this, and then you would pay the 10% on top of that. And for every month you don't pay, you would pay 10% for a fine for being late. I understand. I mean, it's a sovereign land. They decide what they want to do. Makes sense. But I wanted to hit two birds with one stone, and I responded to them saying that, all right, I'll make the payment before this fine happens. I was somehow waiting for them to come back to me to open this communication. But I told them, I have a problem with the payment. Can you call me? And they did. And when they called me, I had this whole conversation with them, and the guy was laughing on the other side, and he said, you should put that down on writing, and it's a good souvenir for you. I mean, he had this sense of humor. So the conversation went something like this, and I put it down in writing later. I have a picture of it somewhere, where I went, all right, you want to charge me 10%, and that's fair. I'll pay you the 10% because these are your rules. But would you be willing to extend the same courtesy on the other end, where you haven't paid my tax returns for over a year now, and it comes up to this much euros? Would you be willing to pay 10% for your tardiness, despite me contacting you several times? And I have the proof of all these. Wouldn't that be fair? Égalité? Wouldn't that be equal on both sides? And the guy was laughing on the other side, like, on m'a jamais fait celle-là. And I was like, what are we going to do about this? And I got paid eventually. But what I'd like to talk about is this communication gap. And I think that's when I really felt, when you can make humor work in your favor, you're getting somewhere. This is something that is a risky thing to do. You cannot play the fool with the finance guys, but here I had good cause, and this is resting on the French culture of open to criticism, where you should not think twice before opening up criticism if you have precedents. I think if I did this in India, it may not fly. So this was a culture cue I learned, and it just came naturally to me. Nobody told me to sit down and do this, and I was very proud of that. This is back in 2019, 3 years in. So answering that question from a short while ago, how long does it take? As much as you've invested because of that farm thing and hanging out with French people with associations and these language learning clubs, this thing came naturally to me. So that's the second layer of what I was talking about. The first layer being language, the second layer being the cultural context. What would be considered offensive in this culture, given that you're coming from another high context culture? For you to learn this is going to be time investment and hanging out with people. And if you just hang out with expats all the time that speak English, you may not pick this up. That's the second level. And I think then the third level, on top of all of this language and cultural cues, is, I'd like to call it nostalgia because I don't have another word, because for you to kind of fit into communication really takes, I've done this with this friend and I know that this is fine. Like when you ask a friend in France, well, this is what he said, or this is what she said, that's what she said. Is that offensive? How do they know? There's the culture cues that comes naturally, of course, but third layer for me comes from experience of hanging out with people for long enough. So, for example, my friends in India that I met them after like 6 years, having all of these guys in one place after 6 years, you know. But I would permit myself to say what's in my mind without filtering it out, because we stay in touch with these guys. Every time there's a birthday party, we hop on a call. So 5-6 times a year, on the minimum, we just hop on a call and we talk to each other for hours at some weekends. So I don't need to politically correct myself before sharing with them. And this comes from this social intelligence. With this group, the intelligence is you can say these things. You know, you can go this far. If you have this in your mind, you can go this far. And it's not just culture, it's a culture asterisk thing, because I may not say that with my other friends in other friend circles in India. So it's not an India culture thing per se. So it's a little more granular on top of the pyramid, a little more fine than that. Nostalgia of spending so much time with this person that you have this connection with them. And moving to France, there's so many apartments. Since I moved over here as a student, doing some internships. I went to the Netherlands for a bit, came back to Paris, lived in a place that I could only afford back then. And then, I don't have friends that I've been hanging out with for 8 years, although I've been here for 8 years. So how do you invent this nostalgia? I don't think necessarily it's a time thing, the last one. Like, it's not like you need to have spent 12 years before. I don't think that's necessarily it. From that friend circle, for instance, some of those friends in that friend circle, among those 6 guys and among those other 5 guys, one of those guys that I'm close to, we started hanging out with much later compared to everybody else. And this dude, we do have a special bond, and it's not necessarily the more time means better. That's not necessarily true. But I think there's something there where you build a kind of connection with someone over time. I don't know where I was going with these 3 levels of miscommunication, but when it comes to my paperwork in France itself, that public finance thing, the one where they give me my money back, and their response was hilarious. À titre exceptionnel, you know. Um, yeah. I don't know if I want to talk about this really. I mean, it was really an exchange. It was. I finally paid a month late, and I didn't pay a fee, the 10% fine. I didn't pay that, and they responded à titre exceptionnel. Exceptionally, we waiver the 10% for you, and we hope that you get your money soon. Please contact us if you don't. And I got my money back. Yeah, I was very proud of that one. But the first time I saw this URSAF thing, when it came out, URSAF, I think it is, when it came out really late, like a year later, I was sharing with my mom and my dad, well, the money's not here yet, and I'll tell you when it's here. I went away for Christmas and came back. This is like 2 semesters in, doing my internship, and the money comes in, and I was like, how about that? And this social security card as well. I don't know if there's a cultural context to this thing being late. I mean, I observe everything is late in paperwork in France. But if I went back in time, knowing what I know, my conversation would have been a little different. I think I permit myself to be a little more heated up when I'm talking to somebody in India and they're really late. I'm openly frustrated. And I think that just does not fly in France, where you have to keep your cool. You have to be as composed as possible. So I think I was very frustrated over these phone calls. I was like, are you guys kidding me? I've been calling you every month for so long now. What's happening? Can you tell me what's wrong? But I think the right thing to do, what worked out finally, was asking for a rendezvous and pointing out that this is exceptionally late. Would you agree? And asking for a rendezvous, and they don't easily give this thing out. So I got a rendezvous, and there was this lady who was very empathetic on the other side. And I recorded that, with her permission. I recorded that exchange I was having with her. I was like, this will help foreigners. Can I please record this? the video will be shooting me and not you, but your voice will be in it. And she was like, knock yourself out. So I recorded the whole thing. I was having my COVID mask back in the day. Anyway, she was very empathetic, and she said, I see here that your name is SNP and not Joshua Arvind. So I was like, wait, what is SNP? And she goes, SNP is sans nom prénom, without name and first name, family name and first name. And I was like, what do we do? And she was like, we need some proof that this is your real name. Have it translated for us, please. I was like, well, I've already done that multiple times back from my school days. And she said, is it assermenté? I was like, what the hell is that? And then she's like, this is a specific kind of translation. I was like, dear lady, how was I supposed to know if you didn't tell me that this was the blocking point when I reached out online? And she's like, well, do this and it'll be done. And if it's not, you can come back to meet me. And I was like, all right, cool. Do you know an assermenté guy? And she gave me someone's phone number. I called the guy. The same day I went to get the thing translated, my birth certificate translated. I already have anyway, frustrating times. I translated it with that format she asked me to do, with that guy she asked me to translate it from. And you can post it to them. But she said, come back and see me. So I came back with the thing. And very exceptionally, she took it, because she's like, oh, no, that's not how it works. You have to post it. It has to be posted to us. But yeah, this lady was empathetic, and she was like, I'll take it. She took it, and I got my card. This one. It came in 2021. It still took 3 weeks. Anyway, I was living in Paris. This thing is made in Paris, and it took me 3 weeks. And this makes your life so much easier, really. When you walk into the doctor's office, a clinic, hospital, doctor's office. I had the ear pain when I came back to France this year, and I walked in, and they removed the wax that was causing the pain, and I just walked out, and it almost feels criminal, because you just like show them this card and then you walk out. Life is easier. Or they give you a paper, you have to mail them, you first pay, and then they reimburse you to your bank account. And if your bank account is not linked, but easier with this. So yeah, I didn't really want to take this into a very specific direction, but I thought I'd share with you guys a couple of experiences I've had with the French bureaucracy, and how communication can be hard for a high context individual moving to a high context country. So for you Americans watching, if you move to France, I think you will have lesser issue than a Brazilian or an Indian coming in over here. All you have to do is get the level 1, and if you intend to stay here in the long term, eventually you'll get the level 3. And the level 2 will be easier for you to crack than for another high context country. Allô? Bonjour? Je suis pas propriétaire, monsieur. C'est géré par la proprio, et moi je paye mon loyer, tout charge compris. Merci. Au revoir. Yeah, see, I got this call from this energy guy, and yeah, I think in India, this is serendipitous, this anecdote. So anyway, if I got this call in India and it was this démarche commerciale, the commercial guy, I would just hang up, and that's fine. You know, in the Indian context, it's like, he's not interested. And it's not rude, is it? Please tell me. I would do that. Am I rude? It's not rude, is it? I'm forgetting my Indian. But in France, I've done that a couple of times. When they had these kind of démarches commerciales, they would ring me. And when I would be, once I get what they're talking about, and I'm like, this is not for me, I would just hang up. And they would call me again. And I was like, yo, what's up? And then he goes, you hung up. I was like, yeah. What do you want? I was like, well, I was going to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you about that. Well, sir, you could have told me that. I was like, huh. I could. I don't do that. But now I do, like I just did in France, where this guy called up and I was like, all right, cool, listen, either I'm not interested or it's not really me who decides for my apartment. And he was like, oh, not at all. Thank you for taking the time. Good day, sir. I've changed. France has changed me. I think I would not have done this back home in India. Well, that's it for this video. There are 8 skills. I'd love to talk about the other 7 skills one by one. some skills are more professional than others. Like this one, the communicating skill that we just spoke about today, and these 3 layers I just invented from my hat. This is just community and making friends, but there are some others which are more professional. How long have I been recording? I think I'm just going to put this video as is. Where is the timestamp? It is recording, isn't it? Okay, it doesn't say. Oh, 26 minutes. Okay. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.